Welcome to Jared Scott Outdoors, your source in the field for local outdoor news. This week on Jared Scott Outdoors, it's time for the archery elk hunt, my favorite hunt of the year. It's just something I look forward to every year. Out of all the things I film, this is the one thing I really look forward to is September and archery elk hunting, getting to get those bulls coming in screaming. I have gotten Aubrey, my daughter, here, and she's kind of developed a passion for it. So we're hoping that she can get her first archery elk this year. She's done all right with the rifle, but time for some archery elk hunting. Anyways, this is just my favorite time of the year. We get to get out in pretty warm weather, try to get in really close to bulls, get them screaming and just rearing, coming in at you. It's just good times. So let's get after it. The opening weekend found my son Rylee and I heading up one of my favorite ridges, hoping to find elk in the first few days of the hunt before they started to get wise that the hunt was on. However, we didn't find any elk. We did see a bunch on a very distant hillside miles away, but none where we were. As we were slowly hiking along, we spotted a deer that upon closer inspection was a decent little 4-point still in velvet. There was also another deer behind a tree to the left of the screen. We couldn't tell what it was, but with both of us having deer tags, we decided to go ahead and see if we could get closer. When the other deer came out from behind the tree, we were excited to see it was another buck, and an even bigger buck than the first one. It was also a 4-point, but it had a larger frame, and if you look closely, had a little extra on its left side. When I asked Rylee if he wanted to try for it, he was all in. They weren't too far away, probably about 150 yards at this point, but the problem was that they were out in the open, and we didn't have a lot of cover to work with. There were a few scattered trees that we were able to use as cover that made it easy to sneak into about 100 yards. Then we just kept slipping forward a little more at a time. Once to this tree, I wasn't sure what our next move was. However, as I peeked through the branches and located a buck, I found that it was already staring at us. It appeared that we'd been caught. We just held still as possible and then noticed a third smaller buck on the right of the screen. It was also staring at us and may have been the one that caught us, as I hadn't been watching out for it. At this point, the bigger buck entered the picture and was also staring our way. I doubt it had a clue about us, but since the others were on edge, he was smart enough to be on the lookout as well. Then as they started to walk away a little, a fourth one came into view on the right. It was another smaller buck. So now we had 4 bucks. However, they were all on edge and it didn't look like it was going to end well. And as expected, they took off, leaving us with only tracks.
Well, there was a really nice buck in there, and it's too bad we couldn't get him.
There ended up being more bucks than we thought, 4 of them at least. And I think we just had too many eyeballs. And the tree we were using as cover, it turned out there was a spot they could see our legs underneath, and I think that's what caught us. We held still for what seemed like forever. And then they finally took off on us. So we were close, another 15 yards or so, and Rylee would have been shooting. So that was fun, though. We've now completely changed drainages because this morning, from probably 3 miles away from here, we spotted a bunch of elk going up into this pocket of trees. It's a pretty isolated pocket of trees. And it's a spot I've seen before. I've seen elk go into it. And so even though we had to drop about 1,500 feet, and now we're on our climb up 2,300 feet up to that spot, we figured it's worth it because we know there's elk there and we just weren't finding them where we were this morning. So there's a bunch of elk. I'm going to put Rylee on one side and I'm going to go push it, and we're going to see what happens. If they're still there. It's been like 4 to 5 hours since we saw them. Anyways, that's the game plan right now.
Rylee and I made the long trek back up the mountain, regaining the elevation we'd lost earlier in the day. Needless to say, it took a while to get back to where the elk were earlier that morning. Once near the group of trees I'd seen them go in, I sent Rylee up over the top on the other end of the trees where we hoped the elk would file out. Then with him set, I started walking through the trees. I was surprised, however, when we found that the elk had already left. Knowing that the elk still had to be pretty close by, we ate lunch and took a quick nap while waiting for the evening hours when the elk would start moving and giving their location away on their own. Sure enough, that evening a group of cow elk started feeding out of the woodwork and were followed by a young bull that stayed out in the open for some time. We quickly closed the gap a little just so we could get a better vantage point so that we could try to make a game plan. When we got to this better overlook, we found the elk had been a little spooked by what we later learned was a couple other hunters that walked through the area but had no idea the elk were nearby. Anyhow, they managed to bump this very nice 6-point bull out into the open, but being a bigger bull and probably a bit wiser, it didn't stick around long. We watched as it worked its way up higher and eventually out of sight, all the while watching its back trail where the other hunters had walked through. With the bigger bull gone and knowing it wasn't going to be in any mood to return, we once again focused on the other bull that was hanging out with those cows. So all these cow elk, probably close to 30 of them, funneled out of the trees just as the bigger bull did. However, they didn't go too far. They were definitely spooked as they came from the thick trees, but they eventually calmed down and then fed out into the open hillside above. We watched as the raghorn bull followed closely behind. He was probably happy to now be the only bull with all these cows after the other one split. We probably hung out a little too long trying to make a game plan, as this open country they were feeding in was going to make it really tough. But with the bull staying near the bottom, closer to the trees, we thought we might have a chance. Quickly dropping down and working through some thick trees, we then started to climb back up towards the elk. Of course, we tried to keep trees in between us and the last location the elk had been in as we got closer and closer. Once at the edge of the trees and the last of our cover, we couldn't see any elk. We were sure they were there, but the round in the hill just hid them from us. With no other options, we started sneaking straight up with no cover. And of course, that's when we found ourselves being watched. A cow elk had spotted us about 50 yards away, and that meant we were busted. It didn't take it too long before it decided to get out of there and took off. We hurried on up to see what else we could see, but only a few cow elk were still in sight.
Well, we got busted by a cow at about 50 yards, so they're all gone.
A week later found Rylee and I, along with my buddy Mike, looking for elk again. This time we headed up another canyon and covered a ton of country in search of elk. We did find some sign of them having been there, but we couldn't find any elk. I guess the highlight of that day was visiting a beautiful unnamed high mountain lake that we hadn't seen in years. Seeing country like this is just one reason I've always enjoyed archery elk hunting. The following week found me out with my daughter Aubrey. The two of us were planning a 2.5-day backpacking trip into some deep elk country. After we heard a bull bugle a few times but then go quiet, we quickly headed to the opposite side of the ridge in order to get ahead of the bull. That's when we were surprised to hear another bull bugle, and then a minute later it bugled again, but much closer. Without any time, we just hurried and set up.
An unexpected turn. It turned out I got the shot on the bull, and I shot it. I was a little high back. It was not the best shot. I had a good angle. I shanked it just a little bit, so it was up and back. The bull dove down the mountain. All the cows are over here still talking like crazy. They don't know what's going on. I thought we were going to get the bull to Aubrey, but they came in underneath her and right to me. And there's no way I could let it go by without shooting, even though I was hoping she could get it. Holy smokes. They were just filing by. Cow after cow. He bugled. You could hear him right there. I had no way of filming it. It just happened so fast. And then he came in here at 25 yards. I had to kind of go under some brush, and he was right there. wasn't my plan. It was supposed to come to you.
I didn't even hear them come. I had just put some scent on the rocks, like just in case. And so then I was twisting it back up and put it in my pocket, and I look up and I could see a cow. I was like, crap. So I hurried and reached her, and she was right at 40. But there was this one branch. It would have been clear, but there's one person down right over their body. But I could see them all clearly. It was like,
So you watched the bull come by?
Cow. And then the bull, I even watched him like move his head to get around the branches and everything.
You just couldn't get a shot.
I know I didn't have a shot. I was like, oh, Dad better have a shot because I don't. And then I heard your thing go, and I saw the bull like go straight down.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
They filed just one at a time, just right there. That log, that big open log there. You can see that log?
Yeah.
There was that opening right next to it. And so I just waited for the bull. I heard him bugle, so I was like, I know you're back there. I did a cow call right when he got in that opening, and he stopped. Let the arrow go.
Nice.
So as Aubrey said, she didn't have a shot. They walked right past her 40 yards, but there were some branches in the way for her shot. So the only question is, was mine a good enough hit? Because now I'm getting those jitters. So we got to give it some time. All the elk ran this way. The elk turned, the bull turned, and went straight down. Kind of stumbled a little bit, and went down. So I'm hoping he made a lot of ruckus down there too. And then we had another bull bugle up here. So this is that moment when you dread not seeing that perfect shot. So we gotta hope it was good enough. We gotta give it some time. All right, so it has now been over an hour. We decided to give it a full hour just because I didn't like where I hit it. We'll head on down. We completely avoided the area just in case he was close and just left. So this is where I shot from. We'll head down to where he was at, go from there.
Getting to the spot the elk was standing when I shot, there was already some blood on a couple rocks.
Well, we've got some blood right where I shot from. He turned and hit right here and took off, but of course I know he was hit.
The further we went, the heavier the blood trail was. However, it was steep enough and the bull was digging in that dirt really hard as it ran so that it made it easy to follow, even without a blood trail. What made it difficult, however, was it dove into some very rocky, steep, thick country that just made following its trail tough. Oh, there he is. He's down, he's right here. He was in some gnarly stuff. Bull down. Well, this is some gnarly country in here where he dove off into, and I mean, it's just a jungle in here. I had no idea how big he was when I shot him. He's a 5-point, pretty big 5-point, but only single eye guards. Looks like we'll pull him out and try to get him in a better spot that we can show him to you. But that's a good feeling. That's a good feeling. All right, here you go. Here is the bull. It's just crazy. It's crazy how things happen, unexpected, the way they work out. This was really about Aubrey, this trip, and because of that, when I could hear this bull coming, we hurried. I put her in front. I put her up above the trail. I backed up a bit, and just the way they ended up coming in, they came in and there was a branch in the way, so she wasn't able to see. She was able to see them all. She watched this guy bugle when he was coming in, just file by, but she couldn't get the shot. And knowing that she didn't shoot, I knew that she must not have had an angle, and of course I wasn't going to let this guy go. Again, I feel like I did pull a little bit on that shot. Just, I had a little teeny window to shoot from, and so I cow called as soon as it hit there. It stopped, and I shot, and I probably hurried it just a little too much, and I pulled right a little bit. So that's the bad thing. I'm glad we waited, though. It did cover a few hundred yards, probably 300 yards. Ran down this nasty, gnarly hill. There was nothing we could do to move this other than to here. It's just pure jungle below us. So this is as good as we could work with under the situation. These guys are just too big to carry around or move around, but what a fun way to end this. I wish it was Aubrey shooting it, but we'll hurry and try to get this boned out, get the meat and everything back on ice, and see if we can salvage some time still. We've got today and tomorrow, and then a few more days still to hunt. But anyways, we'll get this wrapped up and then get back to hunting for Aubrey if our feet can handle it. We quickly boned this elk out using the gutless method, a way I would highly recommend, and then with all the meat off the elk, started packing it out. It would take a lot more time than we'd hoped, but we were prepared for it and just got to work. Well, we got to the truck last night about midnight. That was a very long, painful, drawn-out pack out with that first batch of meat. So now we've got the last of it on our second day of packing. About 4 miles of a hike in. We've got 1 more mile left and we'll be done with the hiking part of it. But man, it's been brutal. So we'll give our feet just 1 day, which is not enough. We'll give them a day's rest and then come back out Saturday and we'll have Rylee and Aubrey and back at it again. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to the Jared Scott Outdoors YouTube channel.